Hello everybody, Natasha Buttler, JCU Marketing Lecturer, and welcome to this week's topic for Marketing Matters, BU1108, BU2108. And this week we're talking consumer and business behaviour. Now, I've got to say, this is probably one of my favourite areas of marketing, where we're looking at consumer behaviour and business behaviour. So this is now where we start to look into the decision-making process consumers go through on their path to making their purchase. So we're going to consider the level of involvement that affects that problem solving, and look at the situational, psychological, and social influences that impact on that consumer decision-making process. We will then also shift our focus to having a look at and understanding the way businesses actually make their purchasing decisions too. But before we get started, let's of course look at our learning objectives for this week. So by the time we get to the end of this topic, you will be able to recognize the stages of the consumer decision-making process. You'll be able to describe the level of involvement and the types of consumer problem-solving processes. You'll be able to explore those situational, psychological, and social factors that influence consumer behaviour. You'll be able to then look at the different types of business markets we have, understand the characteristics of the business buying behaviour, and finally recognise the stages of the business decision-making process. But first of all, let's look at consumer behaviour. And consumer behaviour is the behaviour of people who purchase products for personal or household consumption. Kind of makes sense, not for business purposes. So that's what we're looking at when it comes to consumer behaviour. And there's a few reasons why, for us as marketers, we want to better understand consumer behaviour. We want to be able to understand consumer behaviour so that we can deliver better options to our customers than what our competitors do. We want to ensure that we are responding to that consumers are responding to our marketing strategy, and that we're able to influence them and ensure that our marketing strategy is successful. We're wanting to, by understanding consumer behaviour, it helps us as marketers understand the what, the where, the when, and the how consumers make consumption decisions, and that helps us in creating a successful marketing mix. And finally, we want to better understand consumer behaviour, because that will help us understand how our customers are going to respond to our marketing strategies. So when it comes to the actual consumer buying decision-making mix, or the decision process, there is a 5-stage process that every single person goes through when making a purchase decision. And that includes, first of all, the problem recognition. We then move to the information search, we evaluate the alternatives, make the purchase, and then it's the post-purchase evaluation. And we're going to look into all of those steps in a little bit deeper. So you might see there, though, that the actual step of the purchase, or the action of the purchase, is only one stage in the process, and it actually happens rather later in the process as well. Now, not all decision processes, once they've been initiated, actually lead to a purchase, because the individual may terminate it at any time. Also, to the consumer decision-making process, or when we're going through this process to make our purchase, we may not go through all those 5 stages, and we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail too. We also need to consider the situational, psychological, and social influences that all impact our decision-making process. And I think too, as we go through this, I want you to think about you in your own life, how when you go through these processes and how you're influenced in them when you're actually making purchases. So let's go and have a bit of a deeper look at those 5 steps of that decision-making process. The first step is that problem recognition. Now, this stage occurs when a consumer becomes aware of a difference between a desired state and our actual condition. And there's a couple of things to consider when it comes to the problem recognition. The speed of the actual consumer problem recognition, it could be fast or it could be slow. Sometimes consumers aren't even aware that they have a problem or a need that needs to be solved. So marketers use sales personnel, advertising, and packaging to help trigger recognition of such needs or problems. So for example, McDonald's quite often will do their advertising around lunchtime. It starts about 11:30 in the morning. So leading into that lunchtime because, I didn't realize I was hungry, but now I am. And what is there out there that can satisfy that need for me being hungry? So McDonald's use that radio advertising to help trigger that problem recognition that, look at my watch, it's getting close to that time. Businesses might send reminders to their customers to remind them that they're due for a checkup, or that their car is due for a service or something similar, to prompt that, yes, that's right, I do have a problem that I need solved. Or else often too, marketers will use the terms such as new and improved, because who wants old and inferior? Consumers, of course, want to have the latest models of phones or games, or even perhaps an improved flavour, even though sometimes that doesn't always work out too well. So as we've seen with Arnott's Shapes or even Coca-Cola back in the 80s. So once we've become aware of the problem or the need that we need satisfied, we then go searching for information about products that will help resolve that problem or else satisfy that need. And there are two aspects that we look at in that information search: the internal search and the external search. So when it comes to that internal search, that's when we look at our memories of past behavior or information that we've had experiences about problems that might solve our problem. So it might be from those past experiences or some other influence of marketing activities. That's right, I remember that ad that I saw. So then if we can't retrieve information from our memory, then consumers, or us, because we're also consumers, perform an external search. And that external search, we go looking to solve our problems. So we might turn to our family or friends to ask their opinions or experiences. We quite often might get online to search for information on products that can solve our problem. And we might look at product information sites or read reviews or forums. Consumers might even seek professional opinions, such as going into a store and speaking to a sales representative. They might refer to packaging on products or displays in store to gather further information. Now, because of the number of potential options that there is to solve our problem, consumers put criteria in place to help narrow that scope of the search and the time that's involved. Because too much information can result in overwhelm or what's called decision fatigue, which then in turn might result in the consumer ceasing search for a solution. As such, marketers try and help the consumers by providing enough information for them to make a decision without needing to look at competitors' offers. So once we've gone through that information search, that will yield a consideration or an evoked set of products or a group of brands that the buyer views as being possible alternatives. In this stage, the consumer establishes a set of evaluation criteria against which to compare the characteristics of the product in the evoked set. The consumer rates and eventually ranks the brands in the consideration set by using their criteria and their relevance of what's important. So marketers can influence consumers' evaluation by framing the alternatives. That is, by the manner in which they describe the alternatives and the attributes. Finally, once we've evaluated our alternatives, we then make our purchase. And in the purchase phase, the buyer finally chooses the product or the brand that is to be bought. They then choose the seller who they're going to purchase it from, negotiate the terms of the transaction, and actually make the purchase or terminate the process. Product availability, the seller choice, and the terms of the sale all may influence the final product decision. But even though we've just made the purchase, the decision-making process isn't over yet, because after the purchase has taken place, the buyer evaluates the product to determine if the actual performance meets the expected levels. This evaluation is based on many of the criteria that consumers used in that evaluation of alternative stage. But there's a certain thing called cognitive dissonance, or also known as buyer's remorse, that quite often occurs when the consumer has doubts whether the purchase was the right decision. Now, I'm sure you've all experienced cognitive dissonance before when you've been out with a friend, maybe having a meal. I know I certainly have. So marketers work to reduce cognitive dissonance through ensuring the product performs as promised and provides adequate solutions if it doesn't. So now that we've considered the steps involved in the consumer decision-making process, in the next video, we'll look at the level of involvement in the decision-making process and the problem-solving processes consumers use.